Hello, Pete. I have two Pete's with me today here. What a
What's
treat.
up?
Hi, everyone. How's it going?
Yeah, it's great. I was having a hard time clicking the button. I was like,
Well,
Well, it's
you're
okay.
here now.
Somehow I'm also Peter Kazanji today, so that's
it's like
my
a
boo.
Spider.
Oh.
It's like a Spider-Man meme, like this.
Yeah, I'll fix that on my end once I go back on the stage. But audience, thank you so much for joining us today. We are here to talk about golf and sales management. And
Woo.
P, P Kazanji number one, the one I think everyone sees the same, that one over here. Peter Biro was telling me that golf and sales management have a lot in common. So I am very excited about this. But while we give folks some minutes to join us today, I want the audience to go into the chat and tell us where you're calling from. We love to hear where you're calling from.
I'm
And
gonna do
I
that
am going
too.
yeah, go ahead, both of you. Both
Mm.
P. Kazanjas, please go ahead and say where you're calling from. And while we wait for the audience to tell us, I'm gonna ask Peter and P, what is your favorite golf course? Let me start with P.
Mm.
Kazanji.
I'm kind of boring. I think probably my favorite golf course has got to be like Top Golf. Does that count, Peter? Am I terrible for
It's
for
it's a
for saying that?
stretch, but yeah, as someone who's like ridiculously data driven, it makes sense because you can get all the stats,
Oh,
So
I
I'll
don't
give
think
it
it's
to you.
that. I think it's the fact that you can like eat wings and like drink beer while like in between like swinging the golf club. Like let's not give you too much credit here. What's your favorite course, Pedro?
Weirdly enough, it's actually a 9-hole course. There's a
Really?
whole course, yeah. There's a 9-hole course right off of like the beach in North Lake Tahoe in Kings Beach.
Oh man.
It's called Old Brockaway Golf Course, and it has to be like the most manicured, beautiful view golf course like I have ever seen for under
Really?
like $80 a round. It is
hmm
it is rad.
hmm That is awesome.
That's
What are the green fees?
I think for like a single playthrough with a cart, it's like $55, and then there's like a replay fee of like 15, so you can get 18 in there for like what is that, $70 if my math
And
adds
it
up
and it's
there.
right on the lake. That's not bad.
Yeah, it's like half a block from the lake. It's awesome.
I like
Unheard
I
of.
love.
so fun.
Yeah.
Well, I also learned today that you can drink a lot while playing golf, so I might do that in the future. All right, let's get started here today. We are here for this masterclass called Shoot Par and Crush Quota with data-driven golf and sales management with this awesome panelists. They have the same name, but they're different people. We are
Yep.
here. We're very excited about the key takeaways you're going to get from this event audience, so stick around and you will learn a lot. Let me get my slides up. There we go. Today's event is brought to you by the team at Modern Sales Pros. And for those of you not familiar with MSP, we are the world's largest and highest quality community for those in sales management, sales leadership, sales and revenue operations, and sales enablement, aka our Modern Sales Pros. And our mission is to create an environment for our members to answer questions they would struggle to solve on their own and to help them see around corners they might not know about. We have 35K K members helping you, like answering all your questions. So with 35K people helping you, I'm pretty sure no questions will be left unanswered and no problems will be left unsolved. And we do that through the robust online forum I just mentioned, the live sessions like this one you're about to experience, and we are coming back to in-person events, which are very exciting. It's very exciting. And we also have quarterly summits. If you're not part of the MSP squad yet, you will be invited to join us right after this event. And as I said, we have quarterly summits, and those are very, very fun.
Oh
We
yeah.
have one coming up in January, the Mega Skull. It's going to be out of this world. And if you like this content, you will love our 3-day Mega Skull happening January 24 through the 26th next year. We are organizing stellar content and out of this world speakers. I just put a link in the chat for your audience to go ahead and sign up for it. It's going to be amazing. But that's enough about other events. Let's focus on this one now. So here are some housekeeping notes. Please ask them a lot of questions. They love answering questions. So use the chat and the Q&A function to ask all your questions. It can be about golf or about sales. They both of them are very like knowledgeable about both. So please do that. Also, this event is being recorded, you will be able to access the recording right after the event is done in the MSP page, in the previous event page in the MSP website, and you will also receive a follow-up email with a direct link so you can have the information handy when you most need it. And MSP does not work alone. We have partners, and today we have Atrium sponsoring this event. So I am going to pass the mic to Pete Kazanji. So Pete, you can take it from here. You can introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about Atrium, introduce our guest, and just start the conversation about golf and sales management. And I'll see you at the end.
I love it. Thank you,
All
Eduardo.
right.
Appreciate it. All right, I'm going to
See you
share my
soon.
screen over here. I think it worked. All right, cool. Hey everyone, my name is Pete Kazanji. I'm one of the founders of Atrium. So Atrium makes what we call data-driven sales management software. It's software that helps sales organizations, so sales managers, leaders, and reps use metrics and data to improve team performance. And one of the really cool things about Atrium is that it's super, super easy to set up. You just log in with your Salesforce credentials, and within 5 minutes, Atrium will show you how your reps are performing across hundreds of metrics. So AEs, SDRs, et cetera. And so the reason why that's important is because that's how we can diagnose like what's up, like where there are areas for improvement with our reps, and then drive better performance, which is like what we're all here to do, right? That's what we do as sales managers and sales leaders and sales operations folks, is make people better. So that's a little bit on us. For folks who aren't familiar with me, as I noted, I'm one of the founders and the CRO here at Atrium. Prior to starting Atrium, I started a recruiting software company called TalentBin. It was acquired by Monster Worldwide in 2014. That's where I went from being a business generalist founder to our first seller, our first sales manager, and then sales leader. It's kind of where I got familiar with what I call modern sales, kind of operationally excellent, analytically excellent sales. Subsequent to the acquisition of TalentBin, I wrote a book on startup sales called Founding Sales, and then started Modern Sales Pro. So that's a little bit on me. I also happen to be joined today by the illustrious Peter Biro, who is one of my teammates here at Atrium. Peter, maybe you can share with folks a little bit about what you spend your time doing here at Atrium and some of the prior sales roles that you've had before.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, hi Peter. When I am not out on the golf course, with my very mediocre 20 handicap, I get to spend my time working with sales managers, sales leaders, SDR managers, SDR leaders, sales operations folks, doing great data-driven sales management. It's a lot of fun,
Oh, yeah.
diagnosing issues, working on org priorities right now. Before this, I've worked in a couple different industries, selling to variety of different sized organizations or businesses, everything from like dental offices to HR tech and recruiting tech. So it's a lot of fun, and I get to learn a lot from the folks that I work with in their sales motions. So it's a great time.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you for joining us, Peter. Appreciate it. Wonderful. So for folks who are interested, one of the offers we're presenting to folks today is to get a data-driven golf pack here that would involve a set of Atrium golf balls, so a dozen Atrium golf balls, so Callaway golf balls. The best data-driven golf book out there. It's called Every Shot's Count. It's by this guy named Mark Brody, who I think he's a business school professor, if I recall correctly. It's absolutely fantastic in terms of using data to improve your golf game, which is a little bit of what we're going to be talking about today, but it's the kind of the book version of it. And then 5 Secrets of the Sales Coach, which is one of my favorite sales coaching books out there. So we're going to go ahead and drop a link to sign up for that. If you are interested in grabbing those, all we ask for in exchange is a quick chat with a quick discovery conversation with one of our account executives. So we're going to be talking about these things today. So the data revolution in golf, how to use data to improve your golf game, how that is analogous to the data revolution in sales management, and then how to use data and metrics to improve rep and team performance in sales land. So pretty pretty symmetrical agenda here. First and foremost, we're going to talk about the golf stuff. So I think the big thing with respect to kind of what has changed with respect to golf in the last, like, I don't know, 10, 20 years is data is now available, right? And where that kind of shows up is a couple different ways. There's, of course, the ability to record data manually in the form of like golf quote unquote CRMs on your smartphone. But then there's also swing analysis as well. So kind of radars, like whether you're talking about like more involved things like TrackMan, or kind of portable things like swing caddies and other kind of like launch monitors there. The point is that now we can measure the game, and also measure your individual game substantially better than ever before. Peter, do you use any of these guys?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the golf CRM. I've been keeping like, golf CRM accurate in like 18 birdies for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Recently started using a swing paddy, which is like crazy how much data you can get about just like your swing path, swing speed. So that's been kind of a fun evolution for me recently.
Nice. I love it. Wonderful. So we're going to talk about a little bit around what these kind of golf metrics look like here. So first, there's what we call manually recorded data. Some of these are pretty straightforward. Like obviously, we're all familiar with the notion of like a golf scorecard, for instance. So there's the total score for your round, pretty basic. How many pars you actually made, right? How many birdies, like one under par that you made? How many bogeys? How many holes were scored one stroke over par? How many double bogeys? Yikes! Right? Like how many holes where you really blew up on, right? And of course, like all that aggregates into your handicap there. And so, there's good information present in a lot of these stats here, right? So you can imagine a player who has an equal number of birdies and an equal number of bogeys. That would probably be someone who's like pretty inconsistent, right? Or you could have somebody who has a lot of pars, but then occasionally just like absolutely like the wheels come off and they like have a bunch of double bogeys, right? And so like using this information to kind of understand where there's improvement areas can be pretty helpful there. What's even cooler though is you can do more advanced statistics as well. And so these would be things that importantly are like precursors to these guys right here, right? And so these are the sort of things that would help you understand where like what is driving these birdies or bogeys or what have you. And so examples of this would be fairways in regulation. So the number of fairways that you're hitting off the tee is kind of like your batting average on fairways. Greens, all these are also known as furs for like the folks who are the hip kids out there. The greens in regulation is kind of the equivalent, but for greens. So the number of greens that you hit with 2 shots remaining for par. This one's a little bit like more problematic, not problematic, but like it's a little bit of a composite metric of this metric as well, because your greens and regulations can be negatively impacted by the fact that you're like missing a bunch of fairways. Still kind of doesn't matter because like what we're trying to do is get ourselves onto the green with two putts to get the ball in the hole. Putting average is the average number of putts taken per green in regulation. Per green in general. So just like are we getting the ball in the hole in 1.5 putts? Are we getting the ball in the hole with like 2.5 putts? Are we somewhere in between? Scrambling percentage is a little bit more sophisticated. It's just, and like probably not one that you like super need to pay attention to, but it's like essentially how you can bail yourself out on if you miss the green, can you bail yourself out by chipping or pitching onto the green and then putting the ball in the hole, sand saves and bogey avoidance. So these are a little bit more sophisticated, but again, these are all manually recorded. So these are just being recorded, like you can record them in your golf CRM there. which is why you need a golf CRM, right? And because if you're not recording this information, you're not going to be able to interrogate it well. Peter, it sounds like you said that you use the 18 birdies.
Yeah, religiously. Every round where the course is mapped, I use it a lot of times for the GPS. It's like a nice forcing function to use the golf CRM. And I'm sure, like, talking to any other golfers in here, it's pretty funny. You can always see, like, hey, turns out you get more furs, you tend to get more gers. But I swear on those days, my putting average is always the worst. I can never put it together. It's so fun to see that in the data. It's every time.
Yeah, which I think can be okay, right? Because if you're only, this is kind of like with sales and bookings, right? Like if you're only paying attention to lagging indicators like bookings or whatever, it can get really demoralizing. Like I think what you were just saying there is like, hey, if you're working, say you're working on your fairways and regulations or your greens and regulation, and you actually do achieve those well, and then like for whatever reason your putting average is off that day, if you weren't paying attention to these precursor metrics, you might just say like, oh man, I'm just like the worst, right? Like I'm not improving at all. Instead of saying, actually, I achieved what my goal was, which was to raise my greens and regulation average. It just happened to be that I now have an incremental improvement area that I need to really focus in on now that I've dialed this guy in right here.
Yeah, great way to like incrementally focus on your golf game. Like especially like I don't know, I'm sure there's a lot of people out there, you golf, you get to a point eventually where you're like, okay, I'm going to take this seriously and like really improve, and like having these things in mind is incremental. Like, okay, sure, I still shot a 95, but my gers were higher, leaves you feeling the course a whole lot better than just saying like, man, I just can't get lower than 95.
Yeah, exactly, right. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later here in a second about how to kind of like coach on this and how to improve behavior there. Cool. And then, so I think a really helpful way of thinking about this is if you like to use this data to improve your game, right? What you need to do is unpack how you par a hole. And so what that means is you have to work backwards, right? So like the last thing you need to do is you got to get it in the hole, right? And so the metric that you're going to use in order to evaluate that would be putting average. Before that, though, in order to get it in the hole, well, you got to get it on the green. And so then the metric that you're going to use in order to evaluate how well you're doing that is greens and regulation. And then the thing that sets it all up at the very beginning is getting it on the fairway, right? Because if you're not getting it on the fairway, it's going to be harder for you to get into the green. If you're not getting it on the green, it's going to be harder for you to get in the hole. So getting it on the fairway is the first thing. And of course, the metric there is fairways and regulation. And so these kind of like benchmarks that can be kind of helpful for understanding what quote unquote good looks like there. And so what you can kind of see here is on the LPGA tour, one of the things that you can see is they're more accurate, right? 70% fairways in regulation, 69% greens in regulations. Putting average is like a little more than the PGA, but you can see that that and where they're lighter is on the distance off the tee there. And so we're going to talk about this a little bit more in a second here, but what you can kind of see is that most regular most mortal golfers are more like LPGA players than they are like PGA players, and that actually has a good implications as to like how you probably should play. The other thing that's kind of fun here is these are some examples of what those precursor metrics look like on a handicap or kind of bucketed by handicap. Do you know how you pronounce this? The Grint? Is that how you pronounce that, Peter? This is like
I would assume so. Yeah, I'm not sure.
yeah. I think this is something that Sean, one of our other colleagues, kind of hit me to, but it's a like a benchmarking site that takes a lot of the information from. I think it might actually be its own. I think it actually might be its own kind of like golf CRM. And so what's kind of cool here is like you can kind of see how like performance improves by handicap, like duh, right? Well, I think what's interesting is that you can kind of see that there's some step functions here. And I think that's actually really like a really good indicator there where it's like it's highly unlikely that you're ever going to get into like a 10 to 15, like you can kind of see this right here. It's highly unlikely that you're going to get to a 10 to 15 handicap unless your fairways and regulation improves. right? And you can kind of see that here, where you can kind of see it's like fairly uniform, and like this is really the big step function. Like if you want to get your handicap better, you got to get better with your fairways and regulation, and then you can kind of see that again. So it's like, hey, getting to 55% here is like what sets you up for success from a to get into the 10 to 15. And then similarly, if you want to get like, you want to be within striking distance of scratch, again, you got to really get that fairways and regulations. What's fascinating that I thought is how the greens in regulation doesn't really seem like it has much of a step function. Like, yeah, a little bit here at the beginning, right? Where just people just like are barely hitting any greens. I guess if you're hitting 10% of your greens, that's like literally like two uh two around, right? But then from there on out, it kind of like uniformly improves over time. Peter, any kind of comments on this?
I gotta say, seeing this for the first time, it makes me feel a lot better as like an amateur golfer here. Yeah, like it's pretty funny to see because there's like so many compounding factors and like I guess you could say like a lot of different leading indicators that would like show up and control what that greens and regulation percentage is.
Mhm.
Harder to focus on like one thing, right? Like I think that's part of why you see the fairways go up so stepwise and the
Yeah,
greens not.
yeah.
Pretty fascinating though.
Yeah, for sure. But I think this is an important thing. Like if you are, it's just like with an account executive, we're like, hey man, like there's no way we're gonna get your win rate better if you're not getting out of discovery, right? Or like let's say you have a pilot motion or a trial motion, like, hey, look, if you're not getting out of discovery into pilots, there's just no way you're ever gonna get to quota. And you can kind of see that here as well. It's like, hey, look, if you want to get to par, right, if you want to get to scratch, which maybe we call that quota, there's just no way you're going to be able to do that until you start hitting fairways, right? Like we can work on our short game all day long. It's not going to matter unless we get our fairways dialed in there, right? And then I
Which
think
is
that kind of points. Go ahead.
I was just say, which is so counterintuitive to like the old adages of golf, and I'm sure we can talk about that with sales too, of like drive for show and putt for dough.
Mhm.
Turns out, like you're driving for dough as well. That is a leading indicator. It is the first step required.
Yeah, yeah, but I think the way that most people kind of think about it is like drive for show, and what people typically think about there is like distance
Yeah,
off the tee.
but it's
Whereas what
accuracy.
this is talking about is like accuracy. Like don't get yourself in the rough. Like don't get yourself in the rough. Don't get yourself in the trees. Don't go out of bounds, right, etc. Because and we're going to talk about this a little bit later around how you can change behavior in order to positively impact these stats. Cool. And then like this is kind of an eye chart of like a little bit of like what those benchmarks kind of look like. Like these are different kind of handicaps across the top here, and then you kind of have like the average, the GERs and the fairways and so on and so forth there. So that's all like manually recorded stats. But one of the really neat things that's kind of going on now is I think we're all familiar with call recording here in salesland. And so my joke here is like call recording. How about swing recording, right? And so you actually have these radars that can help you that can record the characteristics of your swing, like your swing, where the ball went, all these sort of things. There's of course like sophisticated ones that are a little bit more expensive. Obviously, like TrackMan is a big one here. One of Peter's and my colleagues used to work at TrackMan back in the day. And then there's the portable ones as well. This is the one that you have right now, right, Peter?
Yeah, the swing caddy one. It's super rad.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, and so then the data that kind of comes out of that would be things like kind of even more granular, right? So like carry distance. So how far are you actually hitting it? Right? How fast the club is going in order to hit the ball, how fast the ball is coming off the club, right? Launch angle. Are you getting the ball coming off the club at the angle that you would intend based on the club that you're using? Smash factor is, I mean, aside from having an amazing name, it it indicates how well you're putting the force, right, and the speed that you're putting into the club is translating to the ball itself, right? So like it's ball speed divided by the club head speed there. So like you can swing your club fast all day long, but if you're not actually hitting the ball squarely, you're going to have a lot of slippage there, and so your smash factor is going to be more problematic. And then spin rate, is how many revolutions per minute. Apex is how high off the ground. Any kind of favorites here, Peter, that I know that you've just got a launch tracker recently that you've been geeking out on?
I have been like super nerding out on spin rate and apex per club.
Interesting.
Yeah, especially like thinking about like, a sand wedge or a 56-degree wedge, like obviously like your apex will be pretty high. The spin rate is the highest, but actually like trying to reduce my apex on my driver and not pop it up while having like a good forward spin rate. Like crazy
which
little
would which would
micro things.
which would positively impact your carry distance, right? So like,
Correct.
yeah, like it's probably a good example of an optimization. Like once you get your fairways into the state, like once you get your fairways and regulation into the state that you want, then you might say, okay, like maybe I can get a little bit longer here now that my accuracy is good. And then that would be the way that you would do that, is you would say, hey, I'm going to try to get, I want to see if I can get this ball not as high and carrying a little bit further. Right.
Yeah, and roll. It's kind of like the spin rate helps you understand like the roll of the ball after it would hit, right? So
got it. Cool. And so then now with the advent of this kind of radar-based data, you can get a bunch of other benchmarks. So kind of like this is all manually recorded data. This is all radar recorded data. And so what you can kind of see here is this is the average club speed right here, and then this is the carry distance right here. Turns out, like, swing the club harder, ball's going to go further. Weird, right? That's not rocket science. I think the thing that is interesting is you can kind of see the golf driver club head speeds right here. So you can see the average male golfer is around like 93 miles an hour. And that's right in line with an LPGA, the average LPGA player. And then of course you can kind of see these other PGA folks here. And so I think it actually might have been you, Peter, who kind of like noted this to me, is that like the insight here is that, like, guess what? Like we all of us mere mortals should probably index off of the LPGA and how those players end up playing, because that's how you're going to maximize your scores. And so then if we go back and look at these stats from prior, what you can kind of see here is like this is what the averages are in the LPGA here. And so this is something that, like, if you want to get your game better, you would probably be focused on these things right here. So this would be the resist the siren song of like drive for show. Like, oh man, I got to get my driver longer. No, you don't, man. You gotta hit some fairways. You gotta hit some gers. Like it doesn't really matter there. Probably hard for people to come to this realization and be be intellectually honest about it, but it seems like the right kind of strategy, right?
yeah, I mean, like we're never going to be Tiger. Like, can we become more accurate like players on the LPGA? Absolutely, right? Like focus on what you can control. Don't be crazy.
You're not going to be Tiger. I'm going to be Tiger. What are you talking about? Like, get out of here, right?
Maybe Tiger post surgery, but we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. Yeah. Well, geez Louise. Okay, cool. So now we kind of talked about how you capture this information, right? Okay, well, like that's cute, but what we want to do is we want to make things better. And this is actually something that's really important in sales, is like capturing information and kind of like analytics for analytics sakes is not useful. What we're here to do is we're here to improve behavior and improve outcomes, right? And so again, if we think about this, if our breaking down a hole, if the goal is to get into the hole, we got to look at our putting average. If the goal is to get on the green, we got to look at our greens and regulations. If the goal is to get it on the fairway, we got to look at our fairways and regulations. If we do all these things together, guess what? We're gonna have a good score, right? Like my buddy Bill Walsh says, the score would take care of itself. So we actually have some data here that we can look at, because one of our colleagues, who shall remain nameless, is shocking that the people on the sales team here at Atrium would be like data-driven golf psychos. But what you can see here is this is a set of courses, a set of rounds here, where this player has has recorded his FERS, his GERS, his putts per hole, and his aggregate score here. And actually, I think we're going to drop this into the chat here. I actually took this worksheet here and I made it a template, which is kind of fun, where you can just drop your round data in here. It's filled in with a bunch of round data right now, and it'll populate a bunch of graphs and a bunch of other fun stuff as well, which is kind of cool. I know, it was so dorky. I know, I did it on a Saturday, like while my son was like playing Legos next to me. I took the one that our nameless colleague shared with me, and I'm like, all right, I'm gonna make this a template. This is rad. And then of course I made all the charts. So one of the things you can see here is like where, and actually Peter, I think you mentioned this earlier, where great rounds come from is by like putting it all together. Right, so like you can see this round right here in July at Metro. I don't know, where's Metro, Peter? Is that
Oakland Airport? Oakland Airport.
Yeah. So what you can see here is like great FERS, great GERS, at least for this player, great putts for hole, like low score, right? 81 strokes there. The other funny thing is that what you can see is where things didn't come together, or where like they almost came together. So like in this case at Monarch, you can see 54% FERS, 50% GERS. Man, that should have been a great round. Oh, putting. 84, right? Or oh man, 80% FERS. This is crazy. I'm curious what was going on there. Maybe he was
very,
with,
very
like,
wide
irons.
fares at Kurika Park.
Oh really? Okay.
Yes.
Well, cheating.
It's cheating.
Bluebirds. it's like, man, your win rate's amazing. Yeah, it's all inbound leads, man. All hand raisers. Um, and so like, yeah, you've got this, and then like, putting got me again, right? And then you can kind of see where things like really blow up. It's like if two things are off, then like it's gonna be messy. Now that's all well and good. How do we improve things? And so if we sort these rounds by date, what we can see here is how things have kind of changed over time. And so what you can really see here is that this player has really been working on his FERS and his GERS, right? And so what you can see is how that has been improving here, right? So it's like, okay, somewhat okay, somewhat, and then like really kind of hit a seam here, both with respect to fairways and with respect to GERS there, right? And so because I'm a total goofball, I went and I graphed these in in this spreadsheet right here. And so what's kind of cool is you can see that like here's the score over time. You can really tell when he started kind of like focusing in on this stuff and improving his scoring was kind of like last May or so. And so this is great, but this is a lagging indicator, right? This is the outcome of these precursors. And so importantly, what you can see is he really buckled in and focused on making his GERS better, and then also did the same thing with his FERS as well here, kind of getting them back to where they had been previously. I think there was kind of like lighter sample here. Now, the funny thing is, of course, like this is working, but it would seem that the homework here is to get on the putting green. Is that fair?
Sounds like it. I mean, it's like the concept of drift, right? As you're focusing on other things, you kind of forget. Yeah. Oh, I gotta do putting too. Oh, I forgot how to do that.
Right, exactly. It's like when you're a seller and you're like, you've been nailing the mid funnel and nailing the down funnel, and like maybe you take your foot off the gas a little bit when it comes to just doing badass discovery, or like even something as basic as like really great pre-call planning in order to drive just awesome rapport building in the first 3 minutes of a call or what have you. Cool. So this is kind of fun. What would your charts look like here, Peter?
Oh God, you don't want to get into that. I think FERS are going up, GERS are steady, putting's all over the place. Slight score improvement, not as pretty as these graphs. I'll be honest.
Does 18 birdies do they do charting?
Yeah, you can do some charting over time, but it's mostly on like lagging indicators. It's not quite as good unless you like get the paid monthly version at doing this type of charting. So I'm excited to nerd out in the spreadsheet. It's the free version.
You're worth it.
I get the free one here though,
I know, right? Okay, cool. So let's talk about common game improvements here. So, and I think this is really important as relates to like sales management, is oftentimes what people can do is they can get lost in the sauce and say like, oh man, like how am I going to make this rep better? And the way that you do this is just like, hey, we just identify like what is the critical path, like what's the thing that's gating, that like the most, like what's the thing that's gating the improvement here, and then we're just going to buckle down on that. And so like these are the things that potentially could be weak in a game. So do we have weak greens and regulations, right? So if you're not giving yourself 2 putts to par by hitting the green, it's pretty hard to score well. If you've got weak furs, if you're not hitting the fairway, it's going to be harder to hit those greens. If you've got a weak putting average, if you can't get it in the hole, greens and fairways aren't going to be really helpful there, etc. And so one kind of way to think about this, I just used like one example here of what kind of like diagnosing and prescribing might look like in order to address one of these common cases. And so like let's use greens and regulation as an example here. Right. So the problem is that, hey, we're not ending up on the green with 2 strokes to reach par as much as desired. Okay, cool. Like, why does that matter? Well, I mean, like if you don't get on the green with less than 2 strokes to reach par, like it's gonna put pressure on your putting, and might lead to aggressive putts, might lead to bad decisions there, might lead to, not just more 2 putts, might actually end up with like doing more 3 putts, right? And so then, so okay, great. We know that this is a bad scene here. Cool. What are we like? Do we immediately know what it is that we're going to do about this? Not necessarily, right? And that's why what I have here is a thing called additional investigation. And so what we might say is like, okay, where are you missing your greens? Right? Are you missing your greens coming off of roughs? Right? Like, is that why you're missing the greens? Okay, what led to being in the rough? Or are you actually missing your greens coming off of fairways? Okay, why? Right? Is it because like you were really far out from the green? And that might actually indicate that like maybe your distance off the tee is the problem. Or are you just inaccurate? Like, no, I I was I was trying to hit the green with a, I don't know, an 8-iron or a 7-iron or whatever, and like my goodness, I just like missed right or I missed left or whatever. Okay, cool. That has nothing to do with your driving. It just has to do with the fact that you suck with short irons, right? Like, are you missing right? Are you missing left? Are you missing short? Are you missing far? And so like this is a really important thing to understand. Is like, okay, what is the precursor to missing the green here? Because then once we isolate that, and this is something that like we do with our customers all the time with respect to sales motions, is you want to understand, and actually we have these in these handy dandy kind of like laminate cards here. You want to understand what the leading indicator is to the thing that's the problem, right? And so then once you, like, let's say we now know what the issue is, then we can kind of do 2 different things. We can modify our play, and then we can also do homework, right? We can sharpen our knives. And so the play modification, because like, look, ideally we can make our swings better over time, but like that's kind of that's a process, and we probably want to go out golfing on the weekends for funsies anyway, even while our shots are maybe not that great. So like we might want to modify our play even before we've solved the kind of like the root cause from a practice standpoint. So like if you're missing short or long, maybe what we can do is we can change our club selection, right? Or maybe we're doing a bad job of like paying attention to actually how far out we are. Are we missing from far out? Well, maybe it's because like we're not far enough, right? And maybe what we need to do is focus in a little bit more on are we missing, like are we missing because we're coming off the rough, right? Like, is that the root cause of us missing the green? Okay, well, like then the root, like it's actually not a greens and regulation problem. It's actually a fairway problem. It's like a hitting fairway problem. Maybe what that means is that we should hit our 3-wood off the, off the tee, right? Or maybe hit our 3-wood off the carpet in the tee, right? Because like maybe we're more accurate with that, and we're gonna actually hit the fairway even if we like lose 10 yards or lose 20 yards. But at least we won't be trying to hit the green with out of the rough, right?
Spot on. Put the driver away. Always the answer.
Yeah, I know, right? Oh, but it's so much fun. Actually, you know what it is? It's almost like use the driver at Topgolf. That's where you can muscle up, because all it's doing is like messing up your it's actually messing up your rounds. Okay, cool. So that's like play modification. So then we might say, okay, what's our practice homework? So then again, are we missing short and long or left to right with easier clubs? Great. Like maybe we just need to practice our approach shots a little bit better there. Are we hitting more difficult clubs coming at the green? Maybe like for whatever reason we're hitting fairways, but we're hitting fairways kind of short, and so what that means is like we're having to use a 5-iron or like maybe a 3-iron to try to hit the green, which of course is going to be a little bit harder. Okay, well maybe we can actually get a little bit longer off the tee, making it such that we can hit a little bit of our easier irons when we're approaching the greens. Does any of this stuff kind of resonate with you, Peter? Anything that like you're particularly working on right now to improve your game?
Yeah, 100%. The reason why I don't have GERS is because I have a gnarly slice on my driver about 50% of the time. So that's what I've been focusing on. When I take some speed off the driver, or hey, just leave the driver at home and use the wood, guess what? I'm on the fairway more. If I'm on the fairway more, I'm on the green more, right?
There you go.
So definitely
Yep.
plays here. Yeah.
Yeah. So in your case, you don't have a GERS problem. You have a FERS problem, which comes from a driver slice problem. And so the gameplay modification is leave the driver at home, right? Or leave it in the bag, but maybe leave it in the car because it'll just be a temptation in the bag, right? And that's the play modification. And then the practice modification there is, and I think you actually were saying this earlier. Actually, you were literally saying this earlier with the launch monitor is working on the driver at the range in order to get the apex lower, and what was it, the spin rate better?
The spin, whether it's forward or like you can see like side spin, right? It's very
Mhm.
evident that you're slicing with a lot of side spin. That's why it spurls off.
So if we were if I was your golf coach, right? If I was your data-driven golf coach, instead of being your sales manager, if I was your golf manager, what we would be doing is having you report back to us your range sessions and looking at that and looking at improvements there. Is that fair?
Very accurate. Yep.
Yeah, and like, are you working on your driver, right? Are you working on your driver?
Accountability.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the reasons why I just love 5 Secrets of the Sales Coach is they talk about like coach is an acronym. And one of the things they talk about is like when you're doing data-driven sales coaching, you want it's hey, I want you to send me the call clips of your upfront contracts to make sure that you're getting to your next meeting, right? Or I want you to send me the call clips of your closing on closing for the next meeting, right? And so by virtue of the fact that there's accountability there, literally the rep's like, okay, well, I'm gonna have to report back on this, so I might as well do it, right? Cool. So let's talk about how this is related to sales. So the interesting thing is all the stuff that we just talked about is totally applicable to sales as well, right? Like it's time to join the 21st century because we have all this data being used in golf and it's being used in baseball and basketball, and like we have a Moneyball masterclass that we do as well. I suppose this is kind of Moneyball, but this is golf Moneyball.
Smaller ball.
Smaller
Same
ball,
thing.
right? Yeah, and so the same thing is true with sales, right? And moreover, the same way that you can break down executing a hole, right? You can break down a deal as well. So our different objectives are, so like we want to close the deal. Okay, great, right? Like what are we going to measure there? Well, the outcomes there are win rate, but importantly, win rate from proposal, right? Like once we get to proposal, what is our win from there? Well, in order for us to be within striking distance of closing a deal, we've probably got to prove value, right? And so these would be the measures here would be things like number of pilots entered, win rate from pilot. And this actually this is if you have a pilot motion or kind of like a proof of concept or a proof of value motion. There might be another thing here, which is kind of like a needs analysis stage as well. But the point is like, this is how you would measure whether or not people are even getting to here. And then in order to even get to here, well, you got to nail the first meeting and discovery, right? And so this is going to be things like stage conversion and follow-up meeting ratio. And so the cool thing is all of these are measurable. All of these are measurable if you have the right metrics in place. The good news is that the data is available now. And so what we can do here is we can consume this information we can use this information to our advantage. And so these are some examples of those metrics: inputs, outputs, efficacy, etc. Just for folks kind of information, this is literally what we do here at Atrium. Is we help sales managers and leaders and reps use metrics to improve the performance of their teams. And so this is particularly important with respect to sales managers, because sales managers are the ones who have the most impact on reps day to day. And so the problem, of course, is that sales management ends up being pretty tough. There's a number of things that you have to spend your time doing. Obviously, sales managers don't really have a problem of doing deal inspection and strategy. It turns out that the promoted account executives don't really like have to be kind of tricked into doing that, but there's a bunch of other things that need to happen as well. So tracking progress towards goals, database one-on-ones, monitoring the ramp of new hires, identifying issues, right? Identifying issues and then fixing them. It's kind of like figuring out where the issue is in the sales motion of a given rep, and then standardizing the success of top performers, saying, hey, what is it that makes our top performers top performers? The problem, of course, is that most managers aren't really set up for success in order to do this. They're given kind of inscrutable walls of charts here that make it really difficult for them to kind of see what's actually going on. These are not for managers. These are for like analysts, right? And then also most of the enablement investment is focused on reps and not helping managers be better at managing, and managers be better at managing by metric. And so what ends up happening is managers end up they kind of like revert back to the things that they're used to doing. And so what that means is like deals. And of course that's like a super bummer, because that would kind of be like focusing in on like swing without kind of like opening up and saying, where is our problem here? Like where is our problem? Or maybe it's swing, or like hole. Like what happened on this hole? What happened on this hole? Versus saying like, hey, across all the holes, what's the issue? Oh, it's a fairways and regulation problem. Across all the holes, what's the problem? Oh, it's a putting average problem. Let's attack that. And so that's where having data-driven sales management software is really helpful, because, and what that means and what Atrium provides is every KPI that you could possibly want for those account executives and SDRs, proactive goal tracking on that, right? So like, hey, this person's not hitting their GERs. Hey, this person's not hitting their GERs, right? The sales equivalent thereof. Early warning alerting. Hey, this person's greens and regulations is way off as compared to his peers. This is his improvement area right here, right? And then of course, performance issue diagnosis. And so the good news is like this drive, like once organizations adopt data-driven sales management in a meaningful way, it really like revolutionizes the way that they manage and improve their team's performance. So, Gainsight's a great example. They had a 30% decrease in stuck opportunities and unstuck $3 million in ARR of pipeline. Envoy's another great example. They 1.5x their number of customer-facing meetings on their account executive team, and improve their pipeline hygiene by 40%. Another customer of ours, a company called Staffbase, that had an initiative around driving more AE prospecting. They raised AE prospecting behavior and output by 50%. And then of course works with SDRs as well. So Pendo's SDR team is another customer of Atrium, and they increase their pipeline generation on the SDR team by more than 130%. And so like this is where data-driven kind of sales management ends up kind of being really impactful. We're going to talk about a little bit of like what that looks like here in practice. So kind of a little bit of a data-driven sales coaching crash course here. So what we want to do is we want to coach based on data. And so what that means is what like not coaching is not kind of approaching with curiosity and approaching with data. And it says things like, hey, when's that deal coming in? Can you make this forecast bigger? Instead, coaching with data is things like, hey, what's concerning you about the Lockheed deal? I've noticed we only seem to be engaged with 3 contacts there. This is like, hey, Peter, I'm concerned about your golf game because I'm observing that your greens and regulations is deteriorating as compared to where it's been in the past, right? I need you to do more activity. I've observed your meeting volumes for the last 4 weeks have been lighter than usual. what might be contributing to that, right? So using data to figure out what the potential issue is and approach that in a way that we can tackle that and solve that. So we'll use some examples here. So one real life example was a rep that had issues progressing deals down funnel. You can see that this is actually some Atrium data right here from anonymized from one of our customers. This is actually a conversion rate metric card here where you can say Atrium is telling us the conversion rate from each of these stages. So meeting pending, security review, proposal, and contract out. And so you can see that this rep was a little bit light as compared to peers, especially down funnel here, because the peers is the blue here and the rep is the orange. And so you can see that he was a little bit light getting things out of meeting pending and into disco. And then you can also see that he was light with respect, particularly light with respect to conversion rate out of proposal and then conversion rate out of contract out. And so what we did was, they worked on improving their behavior at the top of the funnel. You can see that their conversion rate out of disco, so this is time right here, was a little bit light. And then once they kind of focused in on things, it popped up like, hey, we really need to have good upfront contracts. We need to make sure that we're driving to the next action and the next meeting here. We need to make sure that we're having impactful discovery conversations. And that's going to drive things out of there. It's kind of like this a little bit here. Oops, sorry, the graphs. Right, like, hey, we're going to focus in on our GERs, and like, lo and behold, that's what's going to come out of that there. But it doesn't just happen on its own, right? We have to say, hey, here's the problem, and now we're going to focus in on it and fix it. And so what you can kind of see is that by being more effective at the top of the funnel, this rep gave themselves more at bats, right? Getting more ops to pilot here. And then you can see their win rate from proposal also went up as well there. And so by virtue of kind of focusing in on those improvement areas, what you can see is the rep went from kind of like this fingerprint of their conversion situation, right? So like poor proposals here, or poor conversion out of proposals and poor conversion out of contracts right here, to being kind of best in class there instead. And so what was really powerful about this is that this drove more down funnel pipeline in a very meaningful fashion. You can see that they, whereas this rep previously had a little bit of like a leaky pipeline here, by virtue of getting more deals to pilot, the pipeline was able to grow over time instead, which of course then turned into bookings later on. So that's an example of kind of like data-driven kind of coaching. Now let's talk a little bit about what this looks like in our data-driven sales management looks like with respect to ramp as well, because like ramp is obviously a really, really important point in time in a rep's tenure in an organization. And it's also particularly problematic because you really, really, really have to pay attention to leading indicators there, because there's a bunch of time offsets there. So if you're only paying attention to lagging indicators like bookings, you're gonna potentially have negative surprises there. So let's look at like an example here. You have this Chicken Little here, where they're like, this is the person's ramp that we're paying attention to, and what you can see is that their opportunity ownership over time like looks okay in this ramping view. This is a ramping view in Atrium where you can see everybody's time or everybody's start date is put together at time equals 0 here, and so you can see that their ramp looks pretty solid with respect to opportunity zone. The problem is that their opportunity touches do not look very good, right? So that this is super concerning, that even though they have a bunch of ops that are in their pipe, and if you're only paying attention to this, but you weren't paying attention to this, like if you're only paying attention to FERS, you might be like, oh, okay, things are fine. But if you were paying attention to other important metrics as well, you would note, man, it really seems like there's an opportunity engagement issue here, right? And then moreover, you can see this is pretty where this kind of seems to be related to is a lack of prospecting behavior as well. So this is an accounts touched card right here. And so you can see that in this organization's sales motion, they're actually supposed to be, it's a PLG sales motion. They're supposed to be prospecting into existing PLG account or like free signups, and you can see that this person is actually not doing that at all, right? And you can see that with respect to their peer activity information here. So like their email volume is super, super, super low. Moreover, what you can see is that this is really negatively impacting the stages that are being reached. So this is a different KPI here of how many stages are being hit, right? So in this case, it's discovery, how many discovery stages are being reached. And you can see that this rep starts out like not super great here, but then starts to deteriorate pretty substantially. And it's not super surprising there because the op ownership is okay, but if you're not prospecting at all, right, into the free customer base, you're probably not going to have new opportunity inflow in any meaningful way, and that's going to have negative impacts on your opportunity progression there, right? You're not getting more folks to disco. And so you can kind of see that showing up later on as well, where this reps solution, like the number of ops that are getting the solution presentation are not there as well, right? And like lo and behold, unsurprisingly, this really negatively impacted bookings in a meaningful way. And so you can kind of see this, like the rep kind of comes out of the gate pretty okay, and then starts falling off in a very meaningful fashion. And so what that turns into is in the first quarter of this rep's tenure, you can see that he's won 40% fewer wins than his peers and 40% for 40% less bookings. And so this is a great example of why it's so important to pay attention to leading indicators. In this case, this organization identified this in month 4, and we're able to address this with the rep. But what's kind of funny is like you probably could have identified this even earlier on in a meaningful way. And so you're going to see how this equates to the golf management as well, because if you're not paying attention to these different metrics, you're never going to be able to improve your game because you don't know if it's a guru situation or a fur situation or a putting average or what have you. In this case, it's actually pretty funny. This rep was actually running a side hustle, oddly enough, during work hours. It kind of went a little bit crazy for them, like kind of became the main hustle I get. Eventually they fired the rep, thank goodness, but would have been even better for them to identify that in like month 2 here, right? Month 2 or month 3, it's like, hey, it doesn't really look like you're like taking care of business here, right? So those are some kind of examples there. Peter, any kind of additional comments you might make on like how you've seen stuff like this shake out in your customers?
Yeah, actually, like I was talking to a VP of enterprise sales yesterday. Really, really intelligent guy. He's really big into call coaching, right? He loves sitting down with his reps in Gong and just having them bring calls to coach on. The problem we identified though was actually like it was just a bunch of random calls, meaning like they didn't know
Yeah,
where the problems were in that rep's sales motion to
right,
then go pick, hey, these are the types of calls we need to go listen and
right,
coach on. So same idea as like not knowing your golf stats. You don't know which club to actually go practice. So you're just randomly practicing on the range. That doesn't actually up level behavior or like help you, drop your score, or in this case, like win more deals, right? So you got to know what to practice. Perfect practice makes perfect. So
yeah. Yeah, and so like this is a great example right here where somebody has issues in their sales motion is probably going to show up in, at least for account executives, it's going to show up in their opportunity conversion rates there, right? And so like understanding where somebody has hiccups in their sales motion is going to be the thing that's going to drive better outputs there. So hopefully folks really enjoyed this. Again, like I was saying, if you'd like to get some Atrium Callaway golf balls, a copy of Every Shot Counts, and then a copy of 5 Secrets of the Sales Coach, we're going to go ahead and drop the hyperlink here in the chat. And you can go ahead and sign up for that. Hopefully folks enjoyed this presentation. This is the first time we've put this together. If you have feedback, go ahead and email us on that front. We're gonna be sending out the recording after the fact here. If there are any questions, we can answer those right now. But otherwise, go ahead and sign up for your golf balls. Every shot counts, and 5 Secrets of the Sales Coach. And otherwise, I think, Eduardo, is there anything else that we need to cover here?
It's all good. You cover it all. Golf, sales, and all
Whew.
the follow-up.
I love it.
Thank you so
Excellent.
much. and Peter, that was fantastic. We're going to wrap things up here, but first, I want to thank everyone for attending. Thank you for joining us. I know it's been a long week for everyone. We love having you here, audience. You are the best part of MSP, and also thank you to the amazing Atrium. They are doing great things, so make sure to check them out. P and Peter, thank you so much for all your knowledge. And audience, one more time, this session was recorded, so you will receive a follow-up email with the link for the recording and the key takeaways. Panelists, we can go hang out backstage and talk a little bit more about golf for the weekend.
Nice.
Audience, we